Viridescent Venerer's Artifact Set. Flower. A wildflower that was once a ubiquitous sight in its homeland. It was picked by a hunter who wore it on their chest. A white wildflower that used to cover the earth. It has not withered one bit and still gives off an exquisite fragrance. In the days when wildlife still roamed the earth and monsters had not yet appeared, the Viridescent Venerer would use this flower to conceal her human scent. Thus it was said that to seek the silent and gentle Viridescent Venerer, one simply need to close one's eyes and walk barefoot through the forest, following the subtle fragrance of the wildflowers. Only those who could tread as softly as a hunter could avoid making the leaves crackle underfoot, alerting the queen of hunters to their presence. It was also said that the one who eventually found the hunter was a boy. At that time, disaster had just befallen the ancient kingdom, and misery was spreading across the land. Feather. The fletching of an arrow that once pierced right through its prey, but somehow still remains spotless. A glossy and shining feather of a falcon. It once served as a fine fletching on one of the Viridescent Venerer's arrows. In the past, when the Viridescent Venerer's arrow hit its target, she would come down and stroke the fur of her prey gently until its life force returned to nature in peace. For she knew that one day she too would embark on a journey to the place where the souls of her prey rested. The Viridescent Venerer believed that at the end of her life, she would wake up from reality and be reunited with the departed at a fenceless hunting ranch. But she also believed that the moment her arrow pierced through the monster chasing after the boy, that fenceless ranch at the end of her life was gone from her grasp. For she killed that hideous monster not for the sake of survival, but out of vengeance and suffering. Hourglass. A wondrous instrument that a hunter once wore, it forever points towards their prey. A delicate device used for wayfinding. Legend has it that when the Viridescent Venerer walked barefoot on the fields, the grass beneath her feet would tell her what the birds in the trees could see, and the mud she trod on would tell her what the roots in the earth could hear. But it is said that ever since disaster struck, the grass and trees never spoke again, for the god of the woods had died in the disaster. Since then, she relied on this device for direction when hunting. At the request of a boy she encountered, she ceased hunting birds and beasts. Instead, she made the monsters that brought destruction and suffering her prey. Goblet. A water pouch used by the Viridescent Venerer. Its capacity is much greater than one would expect. A very robust and leak-proof vessel. A legendary hunter known as the Viridescent Venerer once used it to collect whispers by the campfire. One night, the Viridescent Venerer picked up the scent of other human beings. As a hunter, she feared neither wolf packs nor monsters. What she feared far more than this was joining the chatter by the campfire, for she had long forgotten how to speak the human language. Even after rejoining the humans and accepting her place as Viridescent Venerer, no one ever heard her say a single word. Similarly, no one ever saw her leave a single trace behind. The Viridescent Venerer collected the laughter she heard that night and stored it in her vessel. For many years, she would listen back to the voices in the vessel whenever she felt lonely. The Circlet. A proud crown that once belonged to the Viridescent Venerer. It is as lush and green as the breezes of the wild. It's a hunter's hat without any bloodstains. In folklore, it belonged to the uncrowned king of hunters, the Viridescent Venerer. Never become the foe of the earth and the forest. This was the hunter's rule. Instead, a hunter should become a silent part of nature. It's said that a bird once built its nest in this hat. None could ever bestow a crown upon the Queen of Hunters, since the only one superior to her was nature itself. In the crisis that soon followed, her hunter's hat became a frightful sight for monsters to behold. So the Viridescent Venerer's artifact set is another one that's set in the age of the Cataclysm. Remember that the Cataclysm is the event that happened 500 years ago that Lumion and Ether arrived into and immediately wanted to get out and escape from in the beginning cutscene. There are a few artifact sets that talk about specific people who existed during that time and were perhaps not important to the Cataclysm, but who had notable experiences during it. The Viridescent Venerer was a hunter, known as the greatest of hunters at the time, who was very peaceful and nature-driven, as hunters and people of the forest usually are. However, when the disaster struck and monsters began to walk the land, she was run into by a boy. So the boy was being chased by a monster, and it's unclear from the story whether the monster killed the boy, but at the very least, the Viridescent Venerer saw this boy being chased by a monster, and she killed the monster. At that boy's behest, from henceforth, she didn't just hunt for prey in the forest, she began to hunt monsters. There is also the Viridescent Hunt, or Venerer's Hunt, a bow that is also themed after this person, and whose lore also talks about her. The other important piece of information from this artifact set is that the god of the woods died in the disaster. We know that the current Dendro Archon was only been an Archon for 500 years. Not a coincidence that that's also when the Cataclysm happened. We're to understand from this, where it says that the god of the woods had died in the disaster, is that that was probably the original god of Dendro, and the Dendro Archon that we're dealing with now in-game is who replaced the god of the woods during the Cataclysm. That's all we can really get from the Viridescent Venerer's artifact set. Have a good one. Bye-bye.